My name is Eleanora Hart, but everyone calls me Elle. I'm 33, and I read stability the way some people read stars, by the faint lines connecting flickers into a map you can follow home. I don't like drama. I build systems that keep lights on when storms don't ask permission. Before the silence, there was Zach. He filmed strangers talking about truth with a camera that never blinked. He said I anchored him. I believed him. We lived in a sliver of the Oregon coast called Atoria, where mornings smelled like salt and old wood, and gulls argued with the wind. On Saturdays, we scrolled listings for cabins near Cannon Beach, circling rooms with good light for his edits and a quiet corner for my late night schematics. I pictured a narrow desk, a reliable kettle, my laptop humming like a low tide. He pictured magic hour. Both seemed possible. It changed when Rhea messaged him. Rhea, his ex-girlfriend, photojournalist, a woman whose portfolio looked like smoke caught mid-breath. She'd come back from Afghanistan with a pitch for a climate documentary series, something about witnessing change at the edge of collapse. Zach said she wanted logistical advice. I said it sounded cool. That was my first mistake. Not distrust, but inattention. Storms don't knock. They lean into the door you forgot to latch. The weeks after that felt like a camera slowly unracking focus. He left earlier. He came home later. He stopped asking about the microgrid pilot I'd been assembling like a prayer for places too far from lines on a utility map. I'd start a sentence. If we stage the inverters on and watch it skid across his glazed eyes like rain on oil, I'd finish alone. One night over pasta, his phone lit up on the table. Rhea. New footage is insane. My fork paused midair. He didn't look at me. He smiled at a rectangle. I swallowed my pride with a mouthful of overcooked garlic and said I was glad he felt inspired. He glanced up, cocked that documentary voice I'd started to hate, and said, "You don't have to sound like my dad, Elle." Dad. The word took the air out of the room. I stacked plates, ran water, listened to the sink, pretend to be a river while he returned to his laptop. A small clink of ceramic on steel sounded too final. Sometimes you can pinpoint the precise second a bridge starts to burn. It's never when the flames are tallest. It's the first curl of heat you pretend is nothing. 2 weeks later, the air itself felt staged. He stood in the living room, posture set to gentle, like he'd practiced in the mirror. The couch knew before I did. So did the chair I sat in, a yard of cool space between us, the kind of distance tape measures recognize. "I think we should just be friends," he said, careful as tweezers. That's the thing about engineered sentences. They remove debris without cutting the hand holding them. It was a surgeon's line. Precise. Bloodless. "You deserve someone who's as sure about this as you are." I nodded. "Okay." He blinked, unprepared for compliance. "That's it?" "You already left," I said. "I'm just catching up." I crossed the room, took the little bronze house key off my ring, set it on the entry table. It made a sound like a bell, a polite one, from a small chapel, where people whisper before choosing differently. I put on my jacket. The door didn't slam. I didn't cry. The quiet was my answer. The motel off Highway 101 smelled like lemon solvent and other people's endings. I stared at the ceiling where a faint water stain traced the ghost of a continent I didn't want to visit. In the morning, I brushed my teeth in a sink that wobbled on tired bolts and thought about what it means to be deserving. That word always arrives with a cousin. Someone. As if love were a vending machine and I'd been feeding it exact change. Friends texted strategies. One said to fight. One said to vanish. My mother said love is maintenance, not fireworks. Maintenance, I understand. Torque specs, weatherproofing, redundancy. Fireworks I can admire from a safe distance. Back at the apartment 3 days later, evidence organized itself. The walls had already learned to echo. A key waited on the counter with a note beneath it. Sorry, no signature, just a white flag pretending to be paper. I boxed my books with the methodical trance I save for complex wiring, pulled a sweater from the back of the closet and smelled salt and his cologne reluctantly swallowed by cedar. The apartment had so quickly become ours, and then even quicker become this place I used to sleep. I told myself I was relieved, that I'd dodged chaos pretending to be genius. I told myself many things. None of them made a dent in the hum behind my ribs. Work did. The day after I moved my life into a friend's spare room, my company offered a 6-month relocation to Montana, a pilot program building microgrids for communities the map had overlooked. Before, I would have said no. Zach and I had plans, an almost cabin, a calendar. Now there was only a ledger of empty squares and a noise inside me that wanted wind and work and problems I could touch. Yes, I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded like a person whose future had finally found a verb. I drove to Montana in early March. The road widened into a cold, spacious version of quiet that didn't care about me. Great gray distances kept me honest. Somewhere past the Bitterroot, the land turned into a sentence too long for breath, and I let it teach me a new way to inhale. The pilot's base was more functional than pretty. Modular offices, steel, gravel, a coffee machine that brewed penance. My badge photo looked like a woman who'd quit apologizing to mirrors. I learned the names of local contractors who spoke weather like a dialect. My hands chapped. My muscles reacquainted themselves with honest fatigue. Every bolt I tightened said, I am real, and I hold. Nights, when the cold singed the windows, I scrolled out of habit. Zach appeared in Ria's post as a silhouette, a rumor with shoulders. Captions talked about truth punished by capitalism, finding a new grammar for urgency. Comments grew skeptical. Sponsors went quiet. Ria's tone sharpened to the kind of sincerity that cuts whoever reaches for it. I didn't feel vindicated. Relief would have required an audience, and I had dismantled mine. What I felt was a small click deep inside, the way a relay sounds when it knows where the current is supposed to go. One afternoon, at a remote site, wind bullied the scaffolding and sleet needled my cheeks. I was halfway through troubleshooting a stubborn inverter when a raven landed on the frame and stared like judgment. The array hummed to life a minute later, a clean chord under the weather's percussion. The raven blinked, unimpressed, and flew away. I laughed into my scarf. It was the ugliest, happiest sound I'd made in months. That night, I wrote a list in the motel ledger they put by the phone. Things that fail loud. Things that fail quiet. Things that are not failures. They are conclusions. Under that, a smaller note. Storms don't apologize either. Build anyway. Weeks in, I began running the ridge trail behind the site, boots punching thawing ground, breath turning into small, honest ghosts. Each step repeated the new liturgy. Show up, tighten, test, repeat. I was not waiting for anyone to choose me. I was choosing work that would outlast the versions of us that loved noise. I didn't know it yet, but a different voice would soon enter my days with a steadiness that matched my own. A man who didn't perform certainty, he engineered it. I would meet him over a spreadsheet that refused to behave and a joke so dry I almost missed it. His name was Noah Brooks. But that's another current, and it hadn't found me yet. For now, there was only the wind, the grid's measured heartbeat, and a woman learning the difference between surrender and release. When you move to Montana in early spring, the landscape doesn't greet you. It sizes you up. Gray skies, frozen mud, and wind that sounds like unfinished sentences. Every morning I woke before dawn, scraped ice from my windshield, and drove through a silence so wide it made me forget how crowded my old life felt. The base camp sat on the edge of Bitterroot Valley, rows of prefab trailers, each painted the same government beige, all pretending to be permanent. Inside, the hum of heaters and fluorescent lights became the soundtrack to my second act. I kept my head down and worked. That's how Noah Brooks found me. He was the field legal counsel assigned to handle environmental permitting. Mid-30s, tall, perpetually calm, the kind of man who seemed immune to chaos. His jokes came so dry they required translation. The first week, he caught me cursing at a jammed data logger and said, deadpan, it only behaves for people who talk nice. I didn't laugh. He raised one eyebrow, then smiled, barely. See? Progress already. That was the beginning. We saw each other daily, orbiting the same project from different sides, me with wrenches and specs, him with statutes and forms. After hours, we'd end up in the break room, comparing notes. He'd read obscure policy briefs for fun. I'd sketch grid schematics on napkins. It felt unexpectedly easy, the way routine sometimes does when you stop performing your own heartbreak. I didn't talk about Zach, but sometimes silence filled in the blanks. Noah never asked why I'd transferred. He didn't need to. The work itself was punishing. Frozen soil, stubborn equipment, communities skeptical that renewable energy would actually reach them this time. But that was what I craved, proof through effort. Each morning, my breath turned white as I tightened bolts and tested lines. At night, I'd collapse in the small bunk of my modular cabin, scroll my phone until I hated myself, then turn it face down. Because there he was, Zach, popping up in other people's feeds. Behind the camera now, standing next to Rhea, who'd captioned one post. Some stories collapse because the truth refuses to cooperate. Their faces look thinner, her tone sharper. She wrote about sponsors dropping out, about creative integrity versus capitalist compromise. It all sounded like code for disaster. And yet, part of me still checked, because curiosity is grief's nosiest cousin. One night, after scrolling too long, I turned off my phone and stared at the dark ceiling. Outside, the wind howled through the turbines we'd installed that week. I imagined the blades slicing air into energy, motion turned into meaning. Something tangible, measurable. Unlike love, which had never survived data collection. By the second month, Noah and I had fallen into an odd rhythm. He'd walk past my workstation, holding his clipboard like a shield, and say things like, "If the EPA doesn't approve this variance, I'm defecting to Canada." I'd reply, "I'll help you build their first off-grid system." He'd grin, that slow, blink and you miss it grin, and we'd both go back to work. He didn't flirt exactly. He observed. When the site generator shorted out mid-blizzard, he stayed until dawn helping me troubleshoot. While I soldered cables with fingers half frozen, he read voltage values aloud, steady voice against the chaos. At one point I muttered, "Most lawyers I know would have called it a night." He shrugged. "Most engineers I know don't swear in haikus." That earned a laugh I didn't expect. The sound startled me. I hadn't heard myself laugh, not really, since Oregon. Weeks passed. Snow melted into stubborn mud. The grid skeleton we'd built began to hum with life. When the system finally came online, we stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the control panel flash green for the first time. All the voltage readings balanced. Perfect symmetry. A small crowd of locals cheered. Someone handed me coffee in a styrofoam cup. And I felt it. That rare kind of quiet where everything aligns. Noah handed me a folded sheet of paper, the formal certification of approval. "You did it," he said. "We did it," I corrected. He smiled again. "Fair enough, but the headline will still read, 'Heart keeps the lights on.'" I rolled my eyes, but warmth bloomed in my chest. Not infatuation, not yet. Just the recognition of someone who wasn't trying to impress me. He saw me as I was, grease under nails, hair wind-tangled, no pretense, and somehow that was enough. Meanwhile, the outside world, the digital one I used to live in, started unraveling. Ria's posts became erratic. The comments turned brutal. "Maybe chaos isn't the same as artistry. Your message is lost in the noise. Did your backer pull out?" One night she posted a shaky video. Tearful, angry, accusing corporate systems of killing real creativity. Zach wasn't in the frame, but I heard his voice off camera, low, frustrated, muttering something about control. Then silence. No more updates. Just a slow fade, like a channel gone off air. I stared at the blank of her feed and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even curious. That, more than anything, scared me, because indifference feels like freedom only once you've earned it. The next morning, a regional journalist came to cover our pilot site. By evening, we were in the local paper. A week later, a sustainability blog. Then a national outlet picked up the story. The company secured a major grant. And suddenly, my inbox flooded with congratulations I didn't know how to accept. At the final project briefing, Noah slid his laptop toward me. The article headline read, "Engineer Eleonora Hart builds the future of rural power." Below it, my photo, taken candidly mid-laugh. I blinked. "Who took that?" He lifted a brow. "Company photographer. Don't worry, you look competent." I smirked. "That's all I've ever wanted." Then quieter. "Thank you." He studied me for a beat, then said, "You built something that'll outlast all of us. That matters." Something inside me stilled. The way circuits quiet once current finds balance. Outside, rain began to drum on the tin roof. I looked up. "Do you hear that?" He nodded. Best kind of applause. We laughed softly, sitting there, the sound of rain merging with the steady hum of the grid we'd built, proof that not everything ends in collapse. What started as survival had turned into structure, and somewhere in that rhythm I began to feel alive again. Not in the cinematic way Zach used to chase with his camera, but in the quiet, ordinary way you feel when something finally works. Later that night, lightning flickered over the mountains, and Noah and I waited out the storm in the truck after inspecting a wind array. He was quiet for a long time before saying, "I think we should acknowledge this stopped being just professional." I met his gaze. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't performing. "Yeah," I said, "I think you're right." He leaned forward, rain drumming on the windshield, and kissed me. No build-up, no tension soundtrack, just a simple human moment. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like a beginning or an ending. It felt like balance. And that, I realized, was rarer than love itself. If Montana taught me anything, it's that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it listens back. By June, the snow had retreated to the peaks, and the valley glowed in that brief green between thaw and drought. The wind turbines we'd installed spun like disciplined dancers, all motion, no chaos. I used to think love was supposed to feel like that first spin, the acceleration before lift. But maybe it's the rotation after, the sustained rhythm that keeps everything running. Noah and I didn't announce anything. We didn't have to. People on site just started assuming, and no one asked. It wasn't scandal, just a quiet inevitability. We worked. We argued about circuit logistics and legal loopholes. We stayed up too late filing reports, and when our hands brushed reaching for the same document, neither of us pulled away. Our version of intimacy was shared silence at a campfire after a 12-hour workday, him pouring whiskey into enamel cups while I poked the embers and muttered about faulty sensors. He listened, never trying to fix what didn't need fixing. That was the difference. Zach always needed to turn everything into a story. Noah just let life exist without narration. I didn't check social media much anymore, but once in a while, curiosity tugged at me like a weak current. One night, after a site meeting, I opened Instagram and typed Rhea Vale into the search bar. The documentary's account still existed, barely. Fewer posts, longer captions, more defensiveness. The language had changed from "we're redefining truth" to "the industry doesn't want truth." Her comments section had become a battlefield. Someone mentioned that Zach had dropped out. Another claimed the project's funding collapsed. It didn't make me feel good, not in the revenge sense. It just confirmed what I already knew. She didn't need a partner. She needed a reflection. And Zach, for all his charisma, was too easily convinced he was one. I stared at one of her last posts, a black and white image of her silhouette against a desert storm, captioned, "Some people mistake stability for stagnation." It almost sounded like she was arguing with me directly. I closed the app, set the phone face down, and for the first time, didn't pick it back up. A week later, I was standing at the project control hub when the system came fully online for the first community. The numbers stabilized, current, voltage, frequency, all in harmony. The power lines glowed faintly in the dusk. "Grid integrity confirmed," said one of the techs. That phrase hit deeper than I expected. Grid integrity, stability under pressure. I wiped the sweat off my temple and laughed. We did it. Noah, leaning beside me, gave a quiet nod. You did it. I looked at him, and something in my chest unclenched. Not a rush, not fireworks, just relief. The kind that seeps into your bones. When the regional news featured our team, the headline was clinical. Montana Microgrid Project empowers off-grid communities. But the subhead made me pause. Lead engineer Eleonora Hart credits collaboration for success. It was the first time my name had ever been associated with something that didn't collapse. A week later, my company forwarded an email. I'd been promoted. Lead engineer on expansion. More sites, more responsibility. Noah was the first to tell me in person. We were going over compliance paperwork when he slid his laptop toward me, showing the official grant notice. I blinked. We got it? We got it, he said. I didn't even realize I was smiling until he said, "That's the look of someone finally building something that'll outlast her ghosts." I laughed. You make it sound noble. It's just voltage and logistics. He shook his head. No, El. It's permanence. You don't see it yet, but you're wiring permanence into places that forgot what it looks like. That sentence sat in me like warmth after cold. When we kissed again, properly this time, it was during a storm. Not poetic thunder or movie lightning, just a long Montana rain, dense and gray. We were inside the truck, windows fogging, the air thick with the smell of wet dirt and diesel. Noah brushed a strand of hair off my face and said, "You always look like you're listening to something no one else can hear." I smiled. Maybe I am. Then I leaned in. There were no fireworks, just the sound of steady rain on metal, the world's soft applause. Afterward, we sat in silence. Outside, wind turbines rotated in rhythm with the rain, constant and unhurried. It hit me then. Love doesn't have to be the storm. It can be the infrastructure that survives it. Over the next few months, work blurred into something close to contentment. We expanded the grid to 3 more communities. Each installation felt like another chapter of repair, not just of land, but of myself. Noah and I presented at a Denver conference that fall. My voice trembled when I spoke to the crowd about renewable systems, but when I looked down and saw him in the front row, steady, calm, unshaken, my hands stopped shaking too. Afterward, he said quietly, "That's the L I met in a blizzard." I teased him, exhausted and swearing. "Grounded," he said. "Alive." By December, the pilot was labeled a success. The company extended my position through year-end. Noah and I rented a small cabin near Missoula. Wood stove, creaky floors, wide windows that let in too much light. We didn't post about it, didn't share photos, didn't need to. Every evening, the turbines outside hummed like a low heartbeat, and I realized I hadn't thought about Zach or Rhea in months, until the day I did. It was early spring again, 1 year after the breakup, when the receptionist at our field office called my desk and said, "Elle, someone's here asking for you." I walked to the lobby, and there she was. Rhea Vale, thinner, tired, but still with that strange magnetic energy, the kind that burns brightest when it's dying. She looked up at me with a small rehearsed smile and said, "Hi, Elle, it's been a while." My stomach dropped, because I suddenly understood storms don't always stay gone. Sometimes they circle back just to see what survived them. Seeing Rhea again was like watching an old film reel. Flicker back to life, grainy, out of sync, and somehow still too bright. She wore that same curated dishevelment she'd perfected years ago. Wind-tossed hair, denim jacket, one size too big, expression halfway between apology and performance. For a moment, I couldn't tell which part of her was real and which was projection. She smiled, tentative. "You look good, Elle." "Thanks, you too." Line number 1. Rhea shifted her weight. "I'm filming a documentary about rural resilience and renewable energy. Heard about the Montana project. Thought it'd be a perfect feature." Her voice had that practiced sincerity of someone pitching both art and redemption. I knew she wasn't here professionally. If she were, she would have gone through the proper PR channels. Showing up unannounced meant this was personal. I kept my tone even. "You'll need to submit a formal request through our communications team." She hesitated, disappointment flashing behind her composure. "Right, of course." Then softer. "Still, maybe we could grab coffee? Just to catch up?" My instinct screamed no. But the engineer in me, the one trained to test even unstable systems, said maybe just once. I texted Noah. "Rhea showed up at the office. Wants to talk. Meeting her for coffee. I'll fill you in later." He replied a single emoji and added, "Need backup?" I smiled. No one else would have said that without sarcasm. We met at a coffee shop that tried too hard to look rustic. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, overpriced pour-over. Rhea ordered something complicated involving oat milk and cinnamon. I got black coffee. For a few minutes, we danced through small talk. Weather, travel, nothing that mattered. Then silence, the kind that waits for confession. She stared into her cup. "You really meant it, didn't you?" I frowned. "Meant what?" "Letting go," her voice cracked. "You didn't fight for me. You just walked away." I blinked. "You asked me to." "I know, but—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I thought you'd wait, or at least be angry." I felt something cold slide through me. "Rhea, I was angry, just quietly, but I wasn't going to beg someone to stay who wanted to leave." Her eyes filled. "Zach left," she said suddenly. "He met some producer in Denver and just disappeared. The documentary fell apart. The sponsors pulled out. Everything I built, gone." I stayed quiet. She exhaled, trembling. "I thought I needed chaos to feel alive, but it just ate me alive. I chased excitement and lost the one stable thing I had." There it was, the admission, the echo of what I'd once wanted to hear. And yet, nothing inside me moved. I looked at her across the small table. "I'm sorry that happened, but there's nothing I can do about it. You made your choices. I made mine." She winced, nodding. "You're right. You were always the grounded one. I used to think that made you boring. Now I think it made you brave." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. When we finally stood to leave, she touched my arm. Are you seeing anyone? Yes. Serious? Yeah, I said. It is. She nodded, tears threatening again. Then I guess I really did lose everything. I watched her walk to her car, shoulders small under that oversized jacket. For a moment, guilt flared and then dissolved. Not from cruelty, but from clarity. I texted Noah. It's done. He wrote back. You okay? Yeah. Better than I expected. Good, come home. I made dinner. Simple. Grounding. The opposite of every storm I'd survived. That night, rain slicked the driveway outside our cabin. I was halfway through washing dishes when Noah looked out the window and said, Elle, there's someone parked outside. I joined him. A familiar silhouette sat motionless in a small silver car, headlights dimmed. Rhea. Noah exhaled, shoulders tense but calm. I'll handle it. He grabbed his jacket, stepped out into the rain, and knocked on her window. Through the glass, I saw her startle. She rolled it down, voice muffled. I'm waiting for a ride. Car broke down. Noah studied her a moment, then said, It's freezing. Come inside while you wait. She hesitated, then nodded. They sat at our kitchen table, Noah across from her, me hovering by the stove making coffee because it was something to do with my hands. Rhea's eyes darted around, taking in everything. The tidy stack of Noah's legal files, my toolbox by the window, our mismatched mugs, the kind of quiet domesticity she'd once mocked. You two really work, she said finally. Like, you actually understand each other. Noah met her gaze evenly. We do. Rhea gave a bitter laugh. Zach used to look at me like I was this creative genius, like I was the most fascinating person in the room. I loved that, loved feeling mysterious. That sounds exhausting, Noah said simply. She smiled weakly. It was. Turns out mysterious just means inconsistent, and special means self-centered. Then she looked at me. You're lucky, Elle. He's a good man. I know, I said. That's why I'm with him. For a moment, the three of us just sat there, steam curling from our mugs. The rain softened against the windows. Finally, Noah stood. Want me to call a tow truck for you? Rhea shook her head. I'll be fine. She finished her coffee, thanked us both, and left. The sound of her car starting was the softest goodbye I'd ever heard. When Noah came back in, I said quietly, You didn't have to do that. He shrugged. She looked cold. I smiled. You're impossible. He leaned against the counter. She's just someone who didn't know what she had until too late. You don't need to carry that. I nodded. The strange part was I wasn't. Rhea left Montana the next morning. I didn't check to see where she went, because for the first time, I wasn't curious. I didn't want to know what she was chasing. I just wanted to keep building the things that stayed standing. 3 months later, Montana was behind us, literally and metaphorically. The expansion had wrapped, the turbines stood steady, and the hum of the grid became background music to a new rhythm, normalcy. Noah and I relocated to the Oregon coast, not far from Yaquina Head Lighthouse. The cabin we found sat on a bluff, close enough to hear the sea roar, but far enough to see it calm. Mornings began with coffee and fog, evenings with laughter soft enough to feel like gratitude. We didn't make grand promises or big declarations, just an unspoken pact. Show up every day, even when it's boring. That was the kind of love I hadn't known I wanted, the quiet maintenance kind. Work consumed most of my daylight hours. I led a new division focused on rural renewable infrastructure, more sites, more complexity, more responsibility. And somehow, it didn't scare me anymore. Noah kept me tethered. On weekends, he'd drive us along the coast road, stopping where the cliffs fell into mist, the horizon folding over itself. We'd talk about everything but the past. It wasn't avoidance, it was choice. Until one morning, the past reached out anyway. Noah had posted a photo from one of our maintenance sites. It wasn't posed. I hadn't even realized he'd taken it. Me standing on a coastal bluff, tools in hand, dawn breaking behind the turbines. He captioned it, Patience is a form of faith. The photo went modestly viral among renewable energy circles. Colleagues commented, friends reacted, the usual digital applause. Then, as I scrolled through, I saw it, a like, from Rhea Vale. My breath caught, the way it does when you find a name you swore you'd buried. 30 seconds later, the like disappeared. Curious, I clicked her profile. Empty. No posts, no followers, no links. Just a blank bio. Filmmaker. By evening, even that was gone. Her account deleted, completely erased. Noah noticed, too. He looked over his laptop and said quietly, That's intense. Yeah, I said. We didn't talk about it again. There was nothing left to say. A few days later, at dusk, we hiked the coastal trail behind the cabin. The fog rolled in thick and slow, muting the world into shades of blue. Wind turbines turned lazily in the distance, their blades cutting through mist like clock hands, measuring something larger than time. We stopped at a ridge where the ocean met the dark. I stood there, hands in pockets, breathing in salt and distance. Noah squeezed my hand. "What are you thinking about?" I watched the turbines spin, steady as heartbeats, about how you can't save people from the storms they chase. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "No, you can't. But you can build something that outlasts the storms." That line settled between us like a blueprint we both understood. I thought of Rhea, chasing excitement until it burned her clean of purpose, of Zach, drifting from project to project, forever seeking the next authentic moment, and of myself, how long I'd mistaken stillness for failure. Now I finally understood. Stillness isn't the absence of motion. It's the foundation beneath it. I didn't check on Rhea again. I didn't need to. People like her always find another whirlwind to stand in. Maybe she'd finish that documentary. Maybe she'd vanish into another story. Either way, she wasn't mine to fix. Because the truth was simple. Some people only love the idea of you. They love how you make them feel, not who you are when the camera isn't rolling. And you can't build anything real on that kind of illusion. Noah never asked me to be extraordinary. He just wanted me present. And maybe that's what real partnership is, two people quietly showing up, even when there's no script, no applause, no chaos to outrun. The wind picked up, cold and clean. I turned toward the turbines, tall silhouettes against the fog, humming their endless song of conversion and endurance. Once I would have called that sound lonely. Now it felt like proof of life.